We're going to be reading another story today. And our story today is Skeleton Meets the Mummy. And after we read our story, we're going to practice retelling it today. Let's get started. Sammy couldn't wait to go trick-or-treating. He didn't even need a costume. "Not so fast," said his mother. Sammy stopped with a click and a clack. "I need you to bring this thermos of hot soup to Grandma Bones. There's a chill in the air tonight." "But Mom," said Sammy, "Derek is waiting for me." "It's just a short walk through the woods," said his mother. "You'll still have plenty of time to get candy with your friend." "Okay," Sammy said. He took the soup and stepped out into the Halloween night. "It's kind of dark," Sammy thought, as he slowly walked through the woods. Flip, flap. Something flew past Sammy's head. "Oh, it's only a bat," he thought. Whoosh, swoosh. Sammy froze with a shake and a rattle. "Oh, it's only the wind," he thought. Creak, eek. Sammy saw a monster. "Oh, it's only a tree," Sammy thought. Scritch, scratch. Sammy heard the crunching of leaves. Something was following him. Sammy walked faster. What could it be? What's following Sammy? Scritch, scratch. It was right behind him. What is it? Sammy wondered. He was afraid to look. Sammy started to run. Scritch, scratch. It was still right behind him. Sammy looked back and saw a mummy. Click, clack, Sammy ran as fast as he could, but the mummy ran fast too. Scritch, scratch. The mummy was getting closer and closer and closer. Huff, puff, huff, puff. Sammy was tired of running. Sammy was tired of being afraid. Flippity flap, flippity flap. Sammy heard a flapping sound coming from the mummy. And then he had an idea. Sammy turned around, grabbed a loose piece of cloth, and pulled it with all his might. He pulled and pulled and pulled. The mummy spun and spun and spun. Sammy couldn't believe it. The mummy wasn't a mummy after all. It was his friend Derek. "You scared me," Sammy exclaimed. "Well, it is Halloween," said Derek, "and now that I've tricked you, it's time to get some treats." "Okay," Sammy said, "but before we start, I have to go see my grandmother." "Don't you mean your grandmummy?" Derek joked. "Yeah," said Sammy. "Brace you there. Click, clack, click, clack." So if we think back on our story, Skeleton Meets the Mummy, and we want to retell our story, there's 5 steps. Our first step is talking about our characters, okay? And our characters in our story were Sammy, his friend Derek, and Sammy's mom. So those were our characters. The second thing that we're going to do when we retell a story is we're going to tell the setting, okay? And our setting can be when and where our story takes place. And I know that our story is happening on Halloween night because it told us in our story. And we started at Sammy's house when his mother told him to take the soup to his grandmother. And most of our story took place in the woods on Sammy's way to see his grandmother. Okay, so we have our characters, we have our setting. The next part is the beginning of our story. And the beginning of our story is when Sammy was getting ready to go trick-or-treating with his friend Derek. Okay? The middle of our story, the fourth part, is Sammy was walking through the woods on his way to his grandmother, and he heard a bat fly past his head, and he heard the wind blow, and he thought he saw a monster, but it was really just a tree. And then something was following Sammy, and he didn't know what it was, and he was getting scared. And the very last part, our fifth part of our story, is the end of our story. And the end of our story is when Sammy decided not to be afraid anymore, and he unwrapped the mummy to find out it was just his friend Derek. Okay, so we read our story and we were able to retell it. Great job, first grade.